All right, today we're jumping into a really beautiful, touching story from Khushwant Singh called The Portrait of a Lady. This is all about his journey back through memory, exploring one of the most powerful relationships in his life, the unforgettable bond he had with his grandmother. And right off the bat, the author hits us with this line. It's such a paradox, right? It immediately makes you stop and think. What is he talking about? He's asking us to look deeper than just physical appearance. He's talking about a beauty of the soul, a beauty of character, and that's really the heart of what we're going to explore. So let's try and build this picture from the author's memory. For him, she was always old. He just couldn't imagine her any other way. In fact, he says the idea of her ever being young and pretty was almost revolting. Not because it was a bad thought, but because the image he had of her, this incredibly old, incredibly serene woman, was just so complete, so absolute in his mind. And these details, they really paint a picture, don't they? It's not just about age, it's about a life of deep, spiritual routine. You can just see her, always in spotless white, one hand on her waist to steady herself, and the other constantly, rhythmically moving through the beads of her rosary. Her lips were always moving in a silent prayer. Her whole being was this quiet, constant meditation. And this quote just nails the feeling she gave off. He compares her to a winter landscape in the mountains. You know, that feeling of vast, calm, purity. She wasn't just a person living in the house, she was the piece inside of the house. Okay, so now let's go back to the beginning of their story, to the first phase of their relationship. This was when they were living in the village, and their bond was just absolute. It was built on these simple, shared routines that made up their entire day. I mean, look at this. Their lives were just perfectly in sync. She'd wake him up with her morning prayers while getting him ready. They'd walk to the temple school together, and while he learned his alphabet, she would sit right there reading her scriptures. And the day would end with another shared ritual, walking home and feeding stale chapatis to the village dogs. Their friendship was this constant, comfortable rhythm. But then, everything changed. The author himself calls it a turning point. His parents were finally settled in the city, and they sent for him and his grandmother. And with that one move, that shared life they had built, well, it started to come apart. And this, right here, shows you the heart of the growing distance between them. On one side, you have her world, the alphabet, morning prayers, scriptures. On the other, his new city school, English words, the law of gravity, Archimedes' principle. It was a world she just couldn't be a part of. She couldn't help him with his homework anymore. And even more, she didn't really believe in the things they were teaching. So, as his world was getting bigger, hers was getting smaller. He wasn't walking with her to school anymore. He was taking a motor bus. The village dogs were gone. And her new companions? The solitude of her spinning wheel. And, as we'll see, the sparrows in their city courtyard. You know, it wasn't just that she couldn't help with his new subjects. She was genuinely upset that his school had no teaching about God or the scriptures. And when he told her he was getting music lessons, which to her was something for harlots and beggars, her reaction wasn't anger. It was silence. And that silence said everything. It created this huge gap between them. The final break, the moment their common link of friendship was snapped, as he puts it, came when he went to university. He was given his own room. And her reaction? No complaints, no anger, just a quiet, dignified acceptance of her seclusion. So her days fell into this quiet, isolated rhythm. From sunrise to sunset, it was just her spinning wheel, and her prayers. But there was this one little bright spot. For half an hour every afternoon, she would feed the sparrows. Hundreds of them would come, creating what he calls a veritable bedlam of chirpings. And that was the only time all day he'd see her truly, genuinely smile. Then he had to leave to study abroad for 5 years. At the train station, she was completely stoic. No tears, no emotion. Just silent prayer as she kissed his forehead. He held on to that kiss, thinking it might be the last time they'd ever touch. But then, 5 years later, he comes back, and there she is at the station to meet him. She doesn't look a day older, and she's still lost in her prayers. And this brings us to the final remarkable chapter of her life. Because on the evening he returned, something happened that completely broke the pattern of all the years he had known her. For the very first time since he had known her, she did not pray. I mean, just let that sink in. This is a woman whose every waking moment seemed to be tied to prayer, and she just set her rosary aside. It was a huge, startling change. So instead of praying, what did she do? She got the women from the neighborhood together, found this old, worn-out drum, and for hours, she just thumped on it and sang. And she wasn't singing religious songs, she was singing songs about warriors coming home from battle. It was this fierce, joyful, and totally uncharacteristic celebration. So you have to wonder, was this really just a party for his homecoming? Or was it something else? A final, powerful act for herself? A kind of warrior song for the end of her own long journey? Well, the next morning, that celebration had taken its toll. She had a mild fever, but she was calm. She told the family that her end was near, and she ignored their protests, deciding to spend her last hours not talking to them, but praying. And then, as she lay there, her lips stopped moving, the rosary fell from her fingers, and a peaceful pallor spread over her face. She was gone. But then came the most incredible tribute of all. As the family was getting ready for the funeral, they noticed something strange in the courtyard. They weren't alone. There were thousands of them. Thousands of sparrows, her little city friends. They were scattered all over the veranda, into her room, right up to where her body lay. And the most profound thing, their silence. There was no chirping. The author's mom felt sorry for them and threw out some breadcrumbs, but the sparrows didn't even look at it. They weren't there for food. They were there to mourn. And after her body was carried away, they just flew off, just as quietly as they had arrived. That silent farewell from the sparrows is just the perfect reflection of the grandmother's quiet, constant, steady love. And it really leaves you with this one big question. How is it that the quietest relationships we have so often leave the loudest, most lasting echo in our lives? It's often not the big, dramatic bonds, but those steady, unwavering presences that shape us the most long after they're gone.